Unmasking false allegations of financial abuse, Part 2.
Now moving on to evidence of where it was paid into, and evidence that she wasn't restricted with her spending. We'll be going through these statements, and rather than me repeating it myself through every single statement saying, this is work, this is from benefits, there's cash withdrawals, cash purchases, etc., because that'll just probably bore the hell out of you throughout showing you all the statements. I'm just going to indicate which ones are which, and as I scroll through them, I'll discuss more the financial arrangements we had when we was in a relationship. But for now, right here, the only filled red arrow you see on statements is the one that tells you how much money was paid in. When labeled like this was her employer. I omitted part of the information because, again, I don't want you to know exactly where she worked. Just protect her identity. So 2 payments here from her employer, and you can see the transactions. It tells you clearly what it was: withdrawal, 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 and payment, withdrawal. So through these statements, that's mainly what you see: withdrawals. Nun's Corner. This is this was next to a college. This is when she was still going to college. I believe she'll start receiving payments from being in education. Yeah, that's what that is. This amount here is from being in education. She received a payout, as did the majority of the students with low incomes. And as the benefits document showed you, and I don't know if you remember, it was an account ending 4215, which is here, and part of the sort code was 205. So that's this statement, and you can see there is a few dozen transactions there, a few dozen withdrawals or purchases. And this is consistent throughout all her statements. Name 94841, and again, employer, and that payouts. So as I scroll through these, I'll also explain that between 2012 and 2013, my income was lower, not just because of burnt out. Not because of the burnt out at all, because the burnt out happened after the tax year ended in April. It was lower also because, before I carry on with that, the blue arrows or the blue circles show transactions in the town where her family lives, most of her family lives, and therefore indicating that she visited the family, because she has also accused, over the last 8 years, accused me of preventing her from developing relationships or friendships and relationships with her family, which is utter nonsense. And besides, on top of that, it goes both ways. But we did go and visit them, maybe not as much as she wanted, but again, we made a considerable effort, and we was expecting a considerable effort back. What was I talking about before I digressed from there? Oh yeah, health conditions. So in my income between 2012 and 2013 was impacted by health conditions or health issues, and that issue was because I developed a large abscess in my lower back. In describing it in vulgar language, it was an abscess that developed from my bum crack up until my lower back. And what that meant is I was unable to drive because I was unable to sit down. The only way for me to sit down, in fact, was to sit down and put all the weight on one cheek or the other. Because of that, I was out of work for most part of 3 months, and that's why income in 2012 and 2013 shows as considerably lower in comparison to the year before. On top of that, around that time, although I couldn't work, I couldn't drive, although we were struggling more to support the household, I increased the loan amount I took in order to support our household, in order to pay for our living expenses. And I believe I have evidence of that, and I'll show you that later on when I come to address, because later on I will come to address the loans and credit cards more in depth, and I'll bring you the evidence to show you who was liable for what, who was liable for the credit cards or for the loans, and what the loans was taken out for. So this is August 2009. Again, the transaction when we visited the family. Deposit. This is a deposit here. I'm not sure if that was mine or hers. I could easily say mine because she wasn't earning money from self-employment. When I was, all her employment income was repaid into her account, directly into account in the first place. And as I've mentioned, or I've already mentioned before, but I'll mention it once again. When she fell pregnant with Gabrielle, I reflected a lot on the arrangements for the future when it came to bringing in an income. And because I'd been self-employed for a few months by then, it was established that I would be able to bring more income in a set amount of hours in comparison to her. And that's why it was decided that when we mutually agreed that one parent should stay at home with either child or both children the first few years of their lives, it was decided that I would go to work because I would be more financially productive than she would, and that's why she would have less money coming into accounts in the first place because she didn't have an income for after maternity pay ended. But you can already see dozens and dozens of transactions in her accounts. You look at these transactions. This is a corner shop, an off license. All these stores. That's a supermarket. That's a pub. Another supermarket. That's like a special occasion card shop. 27th of October. No, I'm not sure who that was for. Saying that would have been petrol. £3 petrol. Okay. Supermarket. Phone payments, like her prepayment plan. So you can see that she wasn't restricted in what she spent. I did ask her to be sensible, just as I expected myself to be sensible, or I expected her to ask me to be sensible too. And that's something else that I'm going to talk to you about. She often would support her allegations of financial abuse because she said I was controlling her spending. And what she meant by that is that we would often discuss our finances with each other. For example, how much money was on each other's account, in order to establish where to set up which account to set up direct debits on, or if we had to take money from one account to put on the other. So we often had discussions like that, or we often had discussions of, if we was looking into buying something significant, we would discuss what would be better options, more options that are likely to be more cost efficient in the long run, and also like if one or other needed, for example, clothes, we would talk to each other to see if we could afford it. And if we could, we buy it. If not, then we'll have to wait a while longer. But those discussions, they are deemed to be rational discussions between two partners in a relationship. That is one way that, ultimately is the way for both individuals in a intimate relationship to keep control of the finances. But this level of control isn't to have a negative impact on the other partner. This level of control isn't to damage the other partner's welfare, or restrict their development or independence. No, these are just rational discussions to establish a range of things, such as how much we could spend, how much disposable income we would have available, or how much income was on each account, and which card to use for shopping this week, or which card to use for petrol, or etc., or insurance, etc. So those are the discussions we had with each other, which is perfectly. These discussions are accepted as a form of communicating with each other when it comes to discussing or addressing the financial aspects of our family lives. This statement is in different format because the original statement sent from the bank was lost. So in order to keep up with the records, we printed a statement from online banking, and I think there's a couple of statements like this. Majority of the statements though are from her bank account, from her bank, directly from a bank. The information I blanked out is basically her name or her employer, or for example here, child benefits. CHB stands for child benefits, and BGC stands for, I think it stands for bank gyro credits. So that's a child benefit, working in child tax credits paid into her account. Like I've said before, there's the evidence. This was in May 2010, pretty much at the beginning of our claims being accepted, just after Gabrielle was born. In fact, it was only a month after Gabrielle was born that bank accounts, those payments. What else I have to discuss? Let me see down here. Yeah, later on I'll also show you who covered which overhead expenses for upkeep in the household, and what other. Well, I might as well discuss it with you whilst I'm going through the statements. So, because of the difference in income between me and her, it was mutually agreed that I would cover expenses such as rent and council tax, house expenses, whilst she focused on general shopping, food shopping, hygiene products, cleaning products, etc. And to me that was proportionate to the level of income each other was bringing in. That was until she started receiving benefits, then she started to take on more expenses. But this was mutually agreed, and again, it was agreed because we had rational discussions over these expenses and how to address these expenses. Or something else that I'll partially show you. I can't fully show you it to be true, but those that knew us, those that were involved with us back then and to these days, some of them to these days, they know that for 2009, for her birthday in 2009, I gifted her a few things, and one of them being her full driving license paid for. That included the theory test, it included driving lessons, and it included the driving tests. I say tests because she didn't pass first time. So that's one thing I gifted her. The other thing I gifted her, and that's something I've already discussed with you, was a mini cruise to Belgium, in which I arranged with her boss at the time to not give her any shifts for a few days. That way it would enable her to have time off to go on a mini cruise. So that was the other gift she received, and the other gift that she received was an update on her wardrobe, because there was a relative need for her wardrobe to be updated. At least that's how she felt. So I think at the time we spent close to £300 in clothes. To some of you that doesn't sound like much, but we wasn't ones for buying expensive clothing. We wasn't ones for buying cheap clothing of very poor quality either, but somewhere in between. And things like, I don't know if this shop still exists, but back then there was a shop called Burton, I think it was, and there was a shop called Republic. We used to go to those shops. Jane Morgan, I think that was another shop. We went to Debenhams. Those shops we went into for her clothing. I'm not sure. I think Burton was on another. It was another time, and that was for my clothing, I think, because they only do males' clothing. But the other establishments I've just mentioned, it was for her clothing, and I think I have records for that in my statements. I don't have records for the full amount I spent on updating her wardrobe. But looking at the bigger picture, for her birthday in 2009, she got her driving license fully paid for, a mini cruise, and an updated wardrobe. On top of that, in 2009, I also organized a birthday dinner at Nando's. Nando's is like a chain of restaurants in UK, perhaps outside the UK too. And I paid for the dinner of several friends, of our friends. I paid for all of that. I think drinks were on, they were liable for the drinks, but I paid for the food. And then we went to watch a film afterwards. So she was spoiled on that birthday. You can easily say that she was spoiled on that birthday. And this again goes against her allegations of financial abuse, because a lot of money was spent on her. I didn't withhold my generosity towards her in that year. In the following years too, when we could afford it, in the following years too, in accordance with affordability. And I will show you evidence to support those. I don't have evidence, every single document for every single thing that I bought, and really, I think that would be kind of rather, somewhat irrational to have kept all those records. But I think I have enough evidence to show, to support my statements that I was that generous with her in 2009. In 2010, for her birthday, I think in 2010 I bought her a cheap car for her first car, a car that wouldn't have mattered if she dented, if she scratched it, whatever. In the first few months or maybe a year of driving, we are more prone to damage our cars. And hence why it makes sense to get something rather cheap, something still roadworthy, and then when we get enough experience, buy another car. So for 2010, I bought her a car, but I didn't buy it close to her birthday. I bought it earlier on in the year. Reason being is that she, with her having Gabrielle, with her being pregnant, with her having Gabrielle, I didn't see it. I didn't see it. I didn't see it as a rational decision to wait till her birthday before I would give her a car. So I decided to give her a car earlier on in the year. And then for that same birthday, I took her on a holiday. Her and Gabrielle. Gabrielle was already born. On a holiday to the Channel Islands, to the island of Jersey. We went sightseeing. We stayed with a couple of friends we had there at the time. And I have footage of this, and I have evidence of transactions in the island. And I think that evidence is in my credit card statements, which we will get to in later on in the video. And that sums up 2010's birthday, her birthday. Now 2011, let me see if I can remember 2011. I think I have to look back on pictures or videos of around that time to figure out. But I think in 2011, she was, you could say, halfway through a pregnancy with Ayrton. And Gabriella, it would have been a year and a half. I think we did something more family orientated. So I'm not sure if we went to the Deep and Hole, the Deep being like a marine sanctuary. I think that's the best definition for it. It's a charity funded one, but it's one that you can see. You get to see rays. You get to see a big range of fish, including sharks, hammerhead shark, quite big stingrays on that tank as well. Also some history on fossils and dinosaurs or marine life from the dinosaur era. So I think that's how we spent our her birthday in 2011. 2012. Well, that's when we spent. I think we either spent it in the Yorkshire Wildlife Park, or we spent it at Chester Zoo. Can't exactly remember what it was. But those will be, I'll bring evidence of those to you later on. Not so much in this video, that'll be in another segment. Part of the domestic abuse, and that segment will be focusing on the emotional and psychological abuse I was accused of for the last 8 years. And there is, and much more will be discussed, because, for her birthdays, I think for the majority of her birthdays, she was at the very minimum, she was relatively spoiled to very spoiled. For my birthday, I didn't get the same treatment, but then again, she couldn't. She was at home with both children, so she couldn't bring in as much an income as I did, and she couldn't afford as much. As much as I did. I'm just gonna have a sip of water. But believe it or not, one of the best birthday gifts I received from her, I think it was in 2012, when she made a surprise birthday cake of the car I had bought at the time. I didn't expect a birthday cake at all on my birthday. So in fact, stick a pin on that, and I'll get back to that in a moment. This document here is to show you that I added her as a joint account holder to my account, because I had accounts with Lloyd's TSB Bank. I'm the main account holder. This is her name, as you can see, Miss Wick, and another letter confirming Well, this part I'm gonna have to omit, edit on the video, edit it out on the video. My name, her part of her name is Wick, and you can see how much more money she had access to. So that's on that statement. Following statement, this much. From what I told you before, don't remember the exact figure, but she had access to approximately £42,500, an extra £42,500 when when we talked about joining each other's account, becoming a joint account holder. So she had access, what was the figure again? To an additional £42,500 in the space of a year and a half, until I burnt out and we opened other bank accounts for the purpose of becoming insolvent. See, it's all here, guys. It's all here. Her name, my name, joint accounts, how much was paid into. I think February. Yeah, this is what I was going to mention to you. Remember when I told you that in 2013, I had an abscess on my lower back and I couldn't work as much, so I increased my loan amount. That's why this money in amount is slightly higher. So there you go, April. So as you can see, she had access to a much higher amount when she became a joint account holder with me. And the same here when it came to her account, which I've already explained to you. She added me to her account as a joint account holder, and all the statements from now on will be in both our names. But you can see the amounts paid in are considerably less in compared to my accounts. So what did we stick a pin on? I was talking about her birthday, my birthday. Oh yeah, when she on my birthday in 2012, I remember waking up in the morning because I'd been working on the previous day, and that was a stage where I was working between 5 and 6 days a week. I was too tired for having enough fun. Didn't have enough fun with them, but nonetheless, I knew she was making a birthday cake for Gabrielle, but I wasn't aware she was making a birthday cake for me. She made a birthday cake in the shape of the car I had at the time. Well, relatively similar to the car I had at the time. That was one of the best gifts I received from her, because it was unexpected and it was something that she made. A few years back, she also gifted me a frame with several drawings that she did herself of me with her and Gabrielle with me or Gabrielle with her, and it had she wrote down lyrics from what we classed as our song at the time, which happened to be "Never Miss a Thing." I don't want to miss a thing from Aerosmith. She was a huge Bruce Willis fan, and that played a part in it, and also the lyrics of the account. So I think that was in 2009 she did that. No, not 2009. It would have been 2011. So I have the pictures I have show that Gabrielle was already a few months older. So this is a loan that we took out in her name, £10,000 loan. But I also show you how that money was spent as I'm going through these statements. So again, you see a huge number of transactions, car purchases, cash withdrawals, It's mainly done by her. I had my own account, and I'll show you my bank statements to show you that I didn't need to use her account for the majority of the time. I didn't have to use her account. And also by showing you my statements, I'll show you that I wasn't an irresponsible spender. So money was spent rationally majority of the time. And the transactions. So this is the first transaction here. £800. Yeah, this transaction was to secure a property when we moved to the northwest of England in Manchester. So that was the £800 to secure the property. I think that was a deposit and some administration fees. So that came off the loan because although we took a loan out to improve our lives, I was still paying money in, because you can see, well, she was still getting money from her benefits here, from our benefits, and occasionally there will be deposits here. So this deposit was from my self-employment, because as I've shown to you, she wasn't receiving any income from paid work. All these were from my self-employment. So although we had money from the loan on her account, I was still paying money in. So we wasn't using the loan money unless it was necessary, or unless it was for the things that we agreed for it to be for, which was to move to Manchester and to buy some equipment for a business venture there, which it was to business venture I started there was removals, moving household items or full house moves, or transporting pianos, and eventually transporting motorcycles. So here's the other amount, £3,900. This was the same company, as you can see, as above, with the £800 figure. It might be on the other statements. Let's go back to it. See? So Stockport Limited CSA, that was the estate agent. Stockport Limited CSA. That figure there was for 6 months rent, because one of the conditions for us to be accepted was if we paid 6 months rent in advance. So yeah, and that was another reason why we decided to take out credit on the amount that it was. Otherwise, it would have been less credit. This payment here of 2,600, this was paid to this individual, and this was for a van that I bought to start moving people's belongings from one house to another, and other items in general, merchandise, even merchandise for shops and warehouses. Whatever work was sent my way, I wouldn't refuse unless it was illegal or unless it wasn't cost effective. Although sometimes you take a loss just to but also considering that you will be gaining another customer, and it would be an opportunity to spread your good reputation, good or bad, either or. But in my case, I tried to spread a good reputation. So that's what the money in her account was. The loan that we took out in her name was for. It was for moving to Manchester, the cost of moving to Manchester, and the cost of buying a van to start the removal, working on the removal sector or moving sector. The amounts I've shown you was 3,900 plus 800 to secure the house, so that's 4,700, and another 2,600 for the van. And then the rest was used was used either for bills, because it was a joint account. It was either used for bills or for more equipment for the business. But I don't know if you guys have noticed so far. There's hundreds of transactions, card transactions, even before 2012, before I became a joint account holder in her account. There's hundreds of transactions that shows that she wasn't restricted from spending. She definitely wasn't deprived from food or transport or etc., because it's all there. So all those transactions tell you otherwise. So these statements in huge part discredit her allegations. Which brings us the question as to how the woman's refuge in Northeast Lincolnshire took her in and kept her there for 2 months. With this amount of evidence, with an overwhelming amount of evidence to show that she wasn't a victim of domestic abuse. This doesn't add up, does it? And it isn't an isolated case, talking about discussing that concept with the many people that I have done. It's clear that it isn't an isolated case. Not many, but a concerning amount of people would move into the refuge as a way to imply domestic abuse, although there wasn't domestically abuse, and as a way to use that against the other partner in the future, perhaps for restraining orders or to remain in control of access or contact between children and the non-resident parents. How do I know that? What can I say about finding out how I found out about that? Well, it's because I've been a taxi driver for many years, and for the years after I was in a relationship, after she left the relationship, and every week I come across close to 100 different individuals. Sometimes 2, 3 people in the same taxi run. Sometimes it was just one. But the point being is that I had the opportunity to speak to a lot of people about the situation that was going on, and too many of them would open up and disclose that they know somebody or they know several people that are going through a similar situation that I am. So this is just to highlight the pressing need for places that take in domestic victims of domestic violence, the pressing need for them to look at the evidence, and at the same time the pressing need for victims to gather enough evidence, because if it comes to that, they will need to show evidence that they've been victims. I'm not saying these places should close down and stop helping people. No, what I'm saying is that they should look into who they're helping in order to establish whether they're helping genuine victims or not. Before we go any further, so I don't know if you notice, statements changed from Barclays Bank to the Cooperative Bank, which I mentioned to you before. This is when we realized that we couldn't keep up the payments and we're likely to be filing for bankruptcy. And as you can see, it was an independent account. She was the only account holder, and I was on mine too, which I will show later on in the video. But the same thing again, working tax credits paid into her account, and child benefit, working tax credits, it's all paid into account, as you can see here. And again, dozens of transactions to show that she wasn't restricted in spending. She wasn't limited. I didn't impose limits on her access, on her spending. Just asked her to be sensible, just as much as she expected me to be sensible too. And these are the statements for the third and fourth quarters of 2013. And like I've said before, I have no statements for 2014 because when I was due to digitize our documents to keep them in a safer place, she had already left the household and moved into a refuge and took both our children in there. She uprooted them from familiar surroundings into a woman's refuge unnecessarily. I guarantee you that it was unnecessarily. Yeah, so this part is nearly over, this part of the statements. I bet you guys are thinking, well, finally, 4 statements left. Because I was working less, there was less money coming in. But to bear in mind, this figure isn't for the whole month as in comparison to the other statements. This figure is likely to be for a couple of weeks. So, for example, 28th of November, and 6th of December, so less than 2 weeks later, another statement, another 260 in. Department of Work and Pension, income support, that's what that stands for, paid into her account. I mean, this is something else. By showing you this, showing these account statements and showing you the evidence of who was receiving the benefits, it clearly shows you that she had full control of that aspect of our financial lives. She had the control over the benefits that was coming in and where they was being paid into. And on top of that, she also had control of the money that was due for paying the rent in our house, the house we were staying in. And the house agreement, the rent agreement, was also in her name. So she had full control of enough financial aspects, and financial aspects in their financial lives, to ensure that she didn't have to move out of the house, to ensure that she didn't have to take Ayrton and Gabrielle away from familiar surroundings. But on top of that, I will also show you a recording of on the day that she left the house. I'll show you a recording where I had agreed to leave the house, perhaps into a rented room, because it was clear that there was a tense environment and it was affecting Ayrton and Gabrielle already. So, and also because of the arguments we was having, I realized, especially if I move out and perhaps seek relationship counseling in order to try and salvage our relationship, in order to reduce the impact it would have on our family, and ultimately try not to destroy the family, to break down the family. That's you'll hear that in the audio file I have from that conversation. Now, why did I record that conversation? Well, I recorded it as much as she did. Reasons being is because the arguments on the weeks before that where part of them will become irrational. Yeah, part of the debates will become irrational, and something else was that I've had a pretty good memory. I have a pretty good memory. I've always had. When I couldn't really say the same for her, and some of the arguments escalated because she was saying that she had done something in a certain way or said something in a certain way. And from what I recall, that wasn't the case. And then it came to a point where I started to significantly suspect that she was doing that, not because it actually happened that way, but because she didn't want to lose the argument. So in order to get to the bottom of it, rather than having a battle of egos, which can be much more damaging, we started recording some of our arguments. And that's how it came about, me having a recording on our last day where I agreed to leave the house, and also agreed to get some more work in order to, support myself whilst I was out of the house, but also to make further contributions to the financial aspect of our family life. So I believe I've covered quite a lot on this video in regards to financial abuse. There's still some other aspects that I'll be covering, such as credit, loans, and also who remains liable for it and how much for, approximately. See, yeah, and what these already show that with me working so many hours, working for as much as I did, I deprive myself. My cat is at the window, so give me a moment. I'm just going to let him in. Come on. Yeah, so with the arrangements that we had, the mutual agreement that we had, that I would, with me being able to earn more than she did in the similar amount of hours, which led us to the agreement of me working while she stayed at home with the kids. By me agreeing to that, I also agreed to depriving myself from having a much more satisfactory amount of time with Ayrton, Gabrielle, or her. So I sacrificed that. And that's something that isn't often talked about, clearly because it would go against her intentions of or her efforts of smearing my character and her efforts to portray herself as a victim, a genuine victim of domestic abuse. But nonetheless, I did that for a few years. I agreed to put myself in that position in order to provide for Ayrton, Gabrielle, and their mom, and myself, of course. And that's something that led me to a period of depression in late 2013, beginning 2014. Also, because that happened, I came to the conclusion I didn't want to be out there working as much as I had done before. As much as I had done before. Here he is, all wet. You could have dried yourself first, couldn't you? Huh? You could have dried yourself, dude. There's a towel in the bathroom. Anyways, what was I saying? Yeah, when it got to 2014, I had several discussions with her, and which I said to her, listen, I don't want to go back to working as much as I did before. So that means that you're going to have to return to work too. And that way we can have a more proportionate amount of time, equally proportionate amount of time with our children. Because, that's time we won't get back with our children. I have realized that when I felt into depression, when I realized that all those years I spent working to get a house were in vain when we reached the point of bankruptcy. However, with that being said, that's something she didn't want to do. She still wanted to carry on with the arrangements we had. She wanted to carry on at home with both children, and she wanted me to carry on working as much as before, or go back to working as much as before, which I refused to do. And in part it was because some of our spending habits from before was unnecessary, such as the car that I bought in 2011 for £7,500 or £7,000. It was something like that. Was there really a need to spend that much on a car? I could have perhaps spent £2,500–3,000 less and purchased a car that was more economic than my previous car, and therefore it would have paid for itself in less time. But also it would have meant that I would have had to work more hours to afford the higher repayments, loan repayments. So in 2014, I come to realize that I don't want to have that kind of life. I don't want to have a kind of life where I'd have to exchange more of my time, compromise more of my time from more of my time as with Aiton Gabrielle and her, compromise more of that time in order to afford higher repayments for a more lavish lifestyle. So ultimately I became more humble from this experience, and I was determined to remain humble. Mainly because I was in that position, I realized how valuable it was for the time I had with Aiton and Gabrielle and her when we was in a relationship. But despite so, she didn't want to return to work. She kept disagreeing to it, and the alternative that she would give is that she would like to go back into education. And this is something I didn't agree to fully, because she already had several qualifications. She had the qualification in hairdressing. She had experience in hairdressing and beauty. She also had a personal license, which in the UK a personal license means that you can sell alcohol. Well, at the time that's what it meant. So she also had a license for that, which she needed to do training for. And also she, if she wanted to, she could have gone into private hire work and maybe just to take kids to and pick them up from school. Something that she didn't have to work as hard, but she would still get a relatively satisfactory amount of income. But no, she disagreed to this, and even when she left, she didn't return to work. She went back into education. She went in to take a university degree. But none of the qualifications she has up to date, she's making full use of. And I don't know what her life is now, but from what people tell me, she isn't making any use of her qualifications. So she spent a lot of time in training for nothing, in vain. I could foresee this in 2014, and this is what I was trying to tell her. But I think at that time she wanted to win the argument, and she disagreed to it. And at the same time, she didn't want to subject herself to the life I had up until 2013, a life of working 5-6 days a week, being very tired. We still went out on days out. I have evidence of that, and I'll show you that. I think I'm more likely to show you that on an Instagram account rather than on YouTube or Rumble or TikTok. We'll see what happens in the future. But yeah, that's the bigger picture with when it comes to financial abuse. I will finish this video, this part of the video, and I will start recording the next part of the video when I have the rest of the evidence in the form of credit card statements and the loan agreements, because the loan agreements, and we'll go over the household expenses, also evidence of me buying the holidays, me paying for the holidays, and the holidays and the expenses there. Not all of them, some expenses she paid for, but basically mainly to show that I was mainly the one paying for the holidays that we went to. So I'll bring that evidence in the form of documents, footage, in the form of pictures and videos, to further support that we did go on holiday. That will be shared in the future, not on this segment of financial abuse, but that's likely to be shared on the segment addressing emotional and psychological abuse. So this is all for now, guys, and I will see you very soon. Goodbye. Say goodbye. She go by, look at this guy. This guy, he has blood on his face. He's been hunting.
In this part, I showed you that all her paid work, benefits and some of my self-employment income was paid into her account, with the total of approximately £65,500. That I gave her access to my bank account from 2012, given her access.to an additional £42,500, meaning she had access to a total of nearly £110,000. Throughout the second part of the relationship, she clearly wasn't put in an allowance. That she carried out hundreds of transactions with her bank card in the form of purchases and withdrawals, clearly establishing that she wasn't forbidden or irrationally restricted to spending money, or that I deprived her from essentials such as food, clothing, fuel for her car, to visit others, etc. That the loan taken out in her name was to cover moving costs, a van for work and some bills we fell behind with. Therefore, it wasn't used for selfish ends or with the deliberate intention of running up credit in her name without repaying it. Besides, she only managed to get credit in her name because a chunk of my income from self-employment was paid into her account. She wasn't forced to give access to her account or forbidden to become a joint account holder to mine. Thanks for watching. Next part coming soon.